Welcome to Search Studio live panel discussion where experts from all over the world come here and share their opinion about fashion. Today I have a lot of guests. I would love for them to introduce themselves. We're going to have a discussion about Dilara Autumn-Winter 2024 collection. Let's start with Rian.
Hi, I'm Rian. I'm a fashion content creator and a fashion writer.
Hi, I'm Stavros Karelis, and I'm the founder and creative director of Machine.
Hi, I'm Maliha Shoaib. I'm a reporter at Vogue Business.
Hi, I'm Tamara Cincik. I'm the CEO of Fashion Roundtable and the Professor of Fashion and Sustainability at Bath University.
And hi, I'm Martyn Roberts. I'm the founder of Fashion Scout.
I'm Giorgia Cantarini. I'm a journalist and a stylist. The first question for all of you would be to give me an impression about the show. What was the first impression that you got seeing Dilara's show last night?
I thought it was beautiful, and I like that it kind of reminds me of, it seems like an homage to all of my favorite designers. I feel like that's kind of what her work always is. Even though it's like critiqued for being derivative, I kind of like that it's references really great designers, and I thought it was beautiful.
When I started watching the show, there was one specific thought that came in my mind, which is a lot of times what happens in fashion, and especially with young designers in London as well. It takes a moment, sometimes for fashion to catch up with what they do and who they are. And we see that very often with quite a lot of designers. I think Dilara is the moment, the same way that Martyn Roberts is the moment for menswear, for the menswear scene. So very, very different designers, but the logic behind it is that I think when they came out, it was still doing something so different from what fashion was about, and I think what fashion is about today is what Dilara does. So I thought the show is a testimony of that. It was an absolutely beautiful show, and I think all her fans would absolutely love it.
Maliha.
Yeah, I always enjoyed Dilara's show. I think that I just enjoy when there's a concept. I like that we were all having to put on our phone torches to find our way to our seats in this really dark church. I like that there was movement direction. I like that the looks have names, which are all really interesting and creative. I just really enjoy that aspect and the thoughtfulness of her approach.
Tamara.
I wanted to love it. I didn't love it.
Why so?
Look, I've been in the industry a really long time, so the references, I was probably at a lot of those shows a long time ago. As a woman coming from the background she does, I'm all for her finding her voice and being brave and pushing boundaries. I'm not convinced that those are really pushing boundaries, being corseted, being in shoes that is, fetish shoes. I just feel in 2024, I had to just catch myself on the year. Is this how we push boundaries still? Because these are the boundaries that were being pushed, for generations, and I would want to see a fresh conversation about that.
Martyn.
What I liked about the show, and what was kind of self-referenced to her earlier shows, there were elements from the venue, the church, the newspaper the model was holding that referenced back to the coverage that she got.
One of her first shows.
Yes, completely. And the colours and such. And it's almost, I'm not going to say greatest hits, but it kind of goes back around. It's like a musician going back through, this is what I was about, this is that. And she explored in that way. And, we'll talk about the movement, we'll talk about venues and music, and it all kind of came together as a dream. And looking at it as a kind of a show perspective, it was all there as an element, not looking as just at the clothing, but actually as a show.
Mm-hmm. Talking about this show, we got a question from the audience that wanted to talk about the movement choreographer that is the same from the Margiela show, Pat Boguslansky. Sorry for my pronunciation. How much is important to give this aesthetic to a show, like the movement and the way the models feel the clothes?
Yeah, choreography is so important. It's music, venue, the choreography is so important. And what I was watching an interview with Pat, and what he was looking at was that he listened to the music, he looked at the venue, and he said, I'm not going to go and show the models what to do. I'm going to talk to them, and that they're going to interpret it in their own way. So each model will do their own thing as a more representative of who they are as a woman, as a person. And so he looked at it, and the venue's great. I mean, it's such a wonderful venue, and you've got the space. It's not, we've seen so many really narrow catwalks, haven't we? And it's like, suddenly here you have this big space, and the models can wander around and such.
So it was a show based on a lot of individualities, different people, different body types. Do you think there was enough inclusion and diversity in the show?
I'm not sure there was enough size inclusivity. I think that with this theme of, very anti-patriarchy and this idea of a femme vortex, what does the world look like without patriarchy? I think we would see a lot more size inclusivity. I think we probably only saw maybe like one plus size model, perhaps one mid-size. Haven't confirmed that with the brand, but from what I saw, I think that's probably what was there. And I think that in 2024, we do need to be doing a little bit more than that, particularly because we see a lot of women designers doing so much more than that. I do think at the same time, though, a lot of her pieces are very sculptural, probably very hard to alter or to create samples for, ahead of time. So perhaps that would present some logistical challenges. But yeah, I would love to see a little bit more of that in the future.
And what about, Rian, the image of the brand has changed over the years, and yesterday felt like a Dilara verse, like a sort of celebration of all the words that Dilara showed us during the years. Were you aware of the evolution of the brand? Did you see some particular outfit that actually you thought was really interesting, or did you like the most?
Yeah, I feel like when the brand started, like with her graduate collection, and when she was, I think, had the her comic book at Machine A.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I feel like it was more punky and kind of like alternative in this like subcultural looking way, and I feel like she's kind of gone in this more couture route, I feel, which I like. Like when she was doing the cross tops that she would do season after season, I thought that would be her signature. But now it seems like this kind of McQueen-esque, like bird-like, structured corseted dress that she keeps doing, this like feathered dress that she's done, I think, for the past 3 or 4 seasons, seems to be her new signature. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I'm glad that it appeals to like high fashion Twitter and like TikTok young people, because I thought the subculture thing would be the most appealing, but that was so far long ago, and it's still like really interesting to people, and I think it's because of how she talks about womanhood and patriarchy and expresses it.
Who would you say has been like inspirations and, let's say, Dilara masters, Tamara?
Well, looking at this show, so we've got McQueen, we've got Margiela, we've got Galliano. I feel I've missed one. Westwood.
For sure.
We've got, I actually want to say Atsudo Kudo on the Holloway Road, the fetish shop. He, a very high end, and I've used a lot in shoots over the years. The denim reminded me of McHugh when he was doing it, the flight jacket, the cropped flight jacket. I think it was quite interesting where it's, a take. Preen obviously did a flight jacket as well earlier this week, so there's a flight jacket moment going on, I think. Yeah, I mean, it felt very McQueeny, also those movements, thinking of Jade Parfit, who was on Sarah Moa's, one of the Sarah Moa covers for 40 years of London Fashion Week, when she was in one of the McQueen collections with the owls coming out of her head, and the movements felt very, I was at that show and it felt very like that. Yeah, and then, I mean, I think we started with Galliano. No, so we start with Gautier, and then we move into a bit of Westwood, and then we move into McQueen, and then we move into Galliano. It felt like that was very much the vibe I got from it.
There were some sporty vibes there.
What, with the denim?
With the denim, with the T-shirts, with the bombers.
Yeah. I mean, the T-shirt, I think that's commercial, the corset T-shirt. And this bomber is commercial. I think they would sell. I mean, Stavros would know better than me. I only store, but I feel they've got a commercial viability.
Would you see Dilara maybe collaborating with a sports brand?
Well, I mean, I'm a massive fan of the Roxanda Barber collection, or Roxanda I know did Fila. I think it's really interesting when you've got these collabs where you take two different worlds and you put them together and you see what energy happens. I think that's interesting aesthetically. And I mean, the industry's been doing that a lot. Either we're running out of ideas or we're looking for money.
We're looking for money, I think.
It's really, look, it's tricky in the UK. There's not a lot of support, and it's tricky to keep going. I've personally really enjoyed some of the collaborations, so I feel like, ugh. But, I'm a massive Roxanda fan, so I've loved her collaborations because I think they add a sports edge, which makes it feel more viable and wearable for today. So I could see a commerciality opportunity for her to do a collaboration, Dilara I'm talking about here, and it would knock out possibly some of the fetish, but it translate it into sports, and that could be really exciting. Yeah, if you use a different fabrication and it makes it more wearable, doesn't it? Because essentially, if you've got a pedal pusher in rubber, but you translate that into another fabric, you've got gym clothes. Yeah.
I think one of the most essential parts of a collaboration, especially between two looking opposites, like a sportswear and a fashion designer, is about tapping into a complete new demographic, because that each one of them didn't have before. It's probably because of price accessibility. If we're talking about the sportswear company, that makes things much more accessible, and both ends, apart from the know-how that they gain from each other, they're tapping into a new audience. I think the bigger question here, if that would happen, is if Dilara really wants to tap into a new audience or not, or she wants to stay super focused. No, super focused on her loyal audience, the ones that they understand the codes and the DNA of what she wants to say. Because Dilara, I think, is a designer that hasn't, and I'm saying it politely, surprised us over the years with going too far away from what she initially introduced and how she has evolved her brand over the years. So that's, I think, it's quite an important always point to understand that some designers might want to stay very focused in who they are, and or focused to who they are and the loyal audience that they have and how they expand that loyal audience instead of maybe experimenting with.
But how do you expand your audience if you're not if you're not growing your audience? It's a commercial exercise, isn't it?
It is a commercial exercise, and I think this is also part of maybe a discussion we can. I don't know if we're going to have it today, but is the purpose of a fashion show, anymore, and we all know that from a commercial perspective, we're going through. Everyone is going through very, very difficult times. I mean, it's extremely, extremely difficult for any designer out there, but any fashion business out there at the moment. And I think this is where the biggest issue comes in, because. I think the designers have been obviously trying to get more business through wholesale, but wholesale is going through a massive crisis at the moment, huge crisis. So they have to find ways to grow the brands safely. Safety, I think, is #1 key priority at the moment, and how they grow their own complete audience through D2C channels, direct-to-consumer channels. And I think she's doing a great job there, because I see a lot of women wearing her stuff, and I think this is different type of women's completely. Especially lately, different complete type of women that some of them even I wasn't thinking, oh, you are 100% a Dilara girl, but they experimented with that. And I think this is much more a personal accessibility that she has.
Also, if you're working direct to consumer, you can do it bespoke to order, which means you're limiting your output, and you can, the issue is if you go into retail and they're doing sell or return, and you're overextending yourself, and that's a problem that a lot of small brands face.
Absolutely.
And what do you think is the key to remain subversive, independent, but also successful in sales? When it comes, to my mind, Rick Owens is maybe one example that I can think of, but maybe you have a few more to give us. And also, is the customer in store really captivated by new brands, and how they shop when they come across a new name?
Yeah, I think that there are a few different levels on the question. So I'm going to, the first part, I think how do you manage to do this as an independent and hold onto your own values, let's say, like of a brand. I think the biggest challenge at the moment, as we said previously, is wholesale is already a very, very big issue. And it's not going to get better anytime soon. Like for the next 1-2 years at least, it's going to be a lot of problematic situations. The way you can do it is you have somehow to secure funds, to be able to make you go ahead and move, but in a safe manner. So hopefully Dilara, I know that a lot of people say that she needs to be appointed as a creative director in a bigger brand, but also her own brand. She has built such a strong identity. Finding perhaps a partner, that really understands what she wants to do as a business model, a new business model, because this industry really needs new business models. They might be able to support her to grow her business in a very healthy manner. When it comes down to the customer, I think the customers are very interested in designers like Dilara. To my understanding, and I'm going to talk only about the Machine A customer because the Machine A customer is also not the same worldwide, but I would say for our customer, the most important part is that they don't want designers that they talk to everyone. They don't want designers that they can do everything. They want a point of view. And a designer shouldn't be designing for everyone as well. That's impossible to make. So I think that when they're very focused and very specific in what they do, then the customers do love them, because this is how you grow loyalty. And loyalty is the key aspect and key objective that brands should seek of, basically, at the moment.
But then what you're saying, agree with completely, but then if you say then working with a sports brand or such, how do you keep that pinpoint focus while growing it? And how do you do that while working with another brand? How do you do that if you become a designer at a big design house, when it's not just your singular vision, this is how I want to do it, because then suddenly all these other factors are in play?
There are collaborations that, as you said, Tamara, there are collaborations that they manage this very successfully. Also, if you see collaborations of Simone Rocha, if you see collaborations of other brands like, Comme des Garçons, etc., Junia, Sakai, massive. So there are many collaborations. Again, I'm going to say it, but Martyn Roberts and Nike, it was incredible. So there are collaborations that they can achieve that, but
you have to be careful.
You have to be. I think it's when those companies are arriving to the young designers.
And that's about business. That's about a good lawyer.
Yes.
And being business savvy and being able to be disciplined. That's about business practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
I do also think it's harder to be a subversive emerging designer now than it was 30 years ago, because back when McQueen and Galliano were coming up, it was very much that they would put out a collection like this, and it was beautiful and artistic and philosophical, and the big brands would see them and be like, oh, we want that one. That one has a vision and an idea about the world, and then the rest would be history. Whereas I think now brands and the role of the creative director has changed so much at these bigger brands that they're looking for someone who is thinking commercially, is thinking about the marketing, is thinking about the whole brand story. So I think it's harder to get to that level right now.
What do you think about the message of the show that was about empowering femininity? Do you agree with it? Do you see it? How do you see the deconstructions of the office wear?
I think, we were talking about this earlier just before we went on air, and there's something quite interesting about the way that women designers, I believe, are perceived less as the creative genius as men are. So I think there's something quite empowering in that in itself, that Dilara is thinking artistically, philosophically, and that she's a woman. I think that's something that we haven't seen as much of. I know that you have your thoughts on the actual design itself, though.
Yeah, it's how to translate what I think and say it now. Having read the backstory, I'm very, very aware of the journey. I hate using that word, but I can't think of another word now. Sorry, forgive me. The development, reading the notes, coming from Kayseri, going to Istanbul, growing up in a religious family, there is definitely a lot of kickback going on. You can see it. There's ideas around sexuality, exposure, rebellion. You know, I've been to 2 shows in churches to a designer from a Muslim background. So there's a hell of a lot of stuff to unpack there, let alone getting into the collections. I'm asking in 2024, in what are we in the 4th wave of feminism, whether fetish is the way to really celebrate that. You know, we've had burlesque, we've had Dita Von Teese, we've had all this. Where are we going as a progression? Because I'm telling you, watching the models walking in those shoes, in those constructed outfits, that just doesn't feel like a empowered position, because it's hard to walk. If that's the conversation, then we have to have a whole conversation around the male gaze and around empowerment when you're going through the female gaze, because I think they're 2 completely different things. It felt very male gaze through the lens of a woman deconstructing the male gaze, looking at her feminism, and still working out a lot of stuff internally around all of the different exposures that she's had in her life. And that is not to underestimate that to come from Kayseri in the middle of Turkey, this is not a metropolitan city, go to Istanbul, you know, live through the Erdogan regime of Turkey, come here and get Lucian Pages as your PR is no mean feat, and none of that is a mean feat. There are opportunities looking through the denim, through the sport, through those collaborations to really go somewhere. But I want to see more empowerment. That to me is not empowerment.
I also think empowerment or feminism is really contextual, particularly like geographically. So I also grew up Muslim, would no longer consider myself so. But I think growing up in the West, the way that Islamophobia has sort of developed, this idea of Islam particularly as repressive is now sort of a dangerous idea here in the West, where we do have, you know, laws in France that are banning Muslim women from wearing a hijab. So I think the context of maybe seeing that in London is perhaps a little bit jarring compared to if you are, you know, even if we're looking over at what happens in Iran, it's the same conversation about women's agency, just a flip side from it, you know?
Well, but she did actually talked about the feminine condition also in her latest shows when she references the Mahsa Amini incident, and she created like dresses out of air because she wanted to support that cause. So are we agreeing that she also did send some interesting messages, or strong messages over the years? Martyn, what do you think?
I read an interview with her and she referenced the 2020s as being a new 1920s. And just kind of going back to what Tamara said, is the 1920s was all about freedom, about taking off these shackles and such.
No corsets.
And then now putting them back on. And it's a challenging thing to look at, and it's challenging to work through.
I just feel feminism isn't a corset.
Yeah. I just think also, I don't know, I fully, hear you, and I respect, everything that I'm listening here, because I was just looking at it, and I keep looking, the shoes and what you said about the corsets, and I'm thinking if this is more reference of hers to the raw sexuality that she's so interested in as well, in the same way, she always loves like that touch, like in her things. I don't know how much this is combined or goes head to head, with feminism, but I think she's very, very interested in this kind of like raw sexual vibe and atmosphere, quite a lot. In her shows, but it's a lot to unpack.
Growing up in a religious family, coming here, there's a lot to unpack in that, and that's probably part of this.
Yeah,
I think there's.
And I also take on board what you've said as well. If to live here, in the West, and to wear a hijab is a very different experience from living in Turkey and wearing a hijab and choosing not to wear it. All of these conversations, the dialectic between the Western gaze and the Eastern gaze, and what it is to be a Muslim woman in these cultures. Turkey is at the apex of this because it's not an enforced rule, but it is part of the political dilemma there.
Rian, you were saying?
Oh, I was saying I think that in terms of feminism, queering fashion, like gendered, like understandings of fashion. I like the conflicting references to femininity with the fetish shoes, with the workwear and things like that, because I think it speaks to the complexity of what it is to be a woman, and also it kind of abstracts what womanhood is entirely and kind of reveals that it's a veil, and that I think that if you interrogate that really, really critically, you can see that femininity, especially from a queer perspective, and gender in general from a queer perspective, it's not to say it's not real, but it is much more complex than I think putting it on the surface and saying one way of being feminine is legitimate and one way is not. Yeah, it makes it allows you to see the veil of what femininity is, and that maybe we shouldn't see it the way that we do.
It's one really interesting point of view, what you say, yeah.
It's can you perform the male gaze without sort of reinforcing it?
Yeah, exactly. And there was also something really interesting about the names of each one of the looks. There were suggestions, or maybe I don't know, a journey she wanted to take us on. Maliha, what did you think about all these names?
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were really fun. There were some really fun ones in there. If we look, there's Cleopatra as the CEO, which I think was the look with the keys that she'd found, I think, from eBay that she turned into a headpiece. There was Fragile Ego. What's this? Something at the football game. These ideas, and I think it really does.
Lover at the football
match. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, breaking the law, dressing for pleasure, hooligan armor.
It's interesting naming every garment in such a way.
Yeah, I love that though. It's really thoughtful.
I think it's so her actually, doing this. I mean, I think
It's like a Kate Bush album, isn't it? Waking the Witch.
Yeah.
I think, Waking the Witch. I mean, you see, I think you see everything that Dilara stands for, in those basically names. And if you talk to her as well, it's exactly that, I mean, and I think it's really for me it's very, very beautiful when I meet people that they stand for what they stand for and they carry on that way, and they're not, and of course they evolve, and some opinions I'm sure that people have shared in the past, they might later on want to not retract from it, but maybe they learn more and they find out more as they go ahead with, not the word journey, let's not use it, but as they go ahead in lives, they learn more, and they also learn more for themselves as well and for the work that they want to put out there. But I really applaud, that there is a designer out there that does what Dilara does. I find it very interesting.
Any one of these ideas, we're just looking at them here, so we've got, these could all be a collection, just the one word.
Exactly.
Dressing for CCTV is a collection, isn't it? Optimistic thoughts.
Mirroring masculinity.
I mean, they're great. I wonder, I'd like to see some more writing, really, because I feel that we've got an English degree.
She's been fiercely independent right from the very beginning,
Yes.
hasn't she? So from when she didn't get into the St. Martin's show and did her own protest show outside.
I mean, that's cool.
That
I mean,
was
good for
cool.
her.
And
That's cool.
Yeah, but I mean, also I think, it's very often, we have to think, and I was talking yesterday to Susie Lau, last night, and actually we're talking about the purpose of the fashion show at the moment, what actually a show serves. And I think, with what happened with John Galliano at Margiela very recently, it's, which that show is going to go down in history, in the history books, probably for the next 20 years for people, to pay close attention and reference and look. It was the first time in my life that actually I was looking tutorials about makeup, about hair, about things that I'm normally not that interested to know the deepest of the deepest
Maybe
details.
we forgot about those things. It was years that we haven't had a show like this.
Exactly. But then at the same time you have to think that he managed to, John Galliano managed to do a show like this because he had the freedom to put something like that for almost a year or 1.5 years that he was working on a show like this. These shows do not happen in a few weeks' time. They don't happen, in a few months' time. You need to give the time and the space and of course the means, for somebody, to be able to produce something like that. So going back to Dilara, watching a show like this, I think, it starts serving a new purpose. Fashion shows start serving a new purpose, are not 100% connected with a marketing tool that they say that whatever I'm going to showcase on a catwalk, is going to increase the sales of those products, you know, like in one or the other way. I think it's all about showing who they are and connecting with the audience in the most real and truthful way, and through artistic expression.
Almost like couture in a way, right? Like all these bigger brands are putting on couture shows or doing these amazing artistic concepts, but really at the end of the day it's to sell their handbags. So I guess it's like, what's Dilara selling? So maybe something she's still figuring out.
I think that'll lead her to a good commercial success though, because I feel like they're, like, for some reason the fashion industry isn't realizing these kinds of alienating shows that are not for everybody. That's what really works, hopefully. I mean, I don't have insights about her sales, but I feel like that's what really works to establish identity with the public. Exactly. And I think that that's why, like, Gen Z, that's why I said I was so surprised that people, like Gen Z young people were really into this brand now, because I liked it so, like, when she was first starting, I was like, I don't know if this is gonna work, but it's that it's weird, it's not what anybody else is doing, and then her, like, obsession with collecting, I think, is why she labeled every single, like, look in the show, and, like, those weird things. Yeah, these alienating, like, aspects of her identity that she puts into the show, I think that's why people connect with it, and I think that can bring the commercial success when you do a shoe or a handbag or even a collaboration like Rick Owens with the Converse and all the other.
Even, like, a lot of people in our generation, obviously, who weren't around for the McQueens and the Gallianos and all that era, it feels sometimes like you missed out on the golden era of fashion. And I think that's why people love Dilara, because it feels like kind of speaking back to that time, and like you can actually go to the show and experience that. I think that's why people love Nigella as well.
It's a nostalgia, part, where, like they can revisit and learn about something. I think actually, maybe what we just even said on the panel, I'm sure, for a lot of audience of Dilara, especially the young audience of Dilara, of course they know the work of McQueen and Galliano, but some of them might not. And because you name them, now they're going, no, but it's good, in a good way, you name them. We said who they are. It gives this opportunity, this chance, to people to go back and research.
Don't you think, when you're doing a show, it's about being in your own voice, which, I think there's a possible disagreement between me and some other here, that, I'm just, rather than referencing so heavily, I want to see the voice. And I felt like, it felt like a kind of, look, those shows, they were exciting. I'm not going to lie, of course they were. And there was a lot of dross around. And then you be like, oh, thank God, for these brilliant designers like McQueen or Hussein or Galliano. Of course, there is always going to be those rare moments in any season and any time, and there will be designers that come and go. I don't know. There's a disconnect for me between the quality and the caliber of those designers and this, and I accept that you're working within limitations. We've already offered a commercializing solution which could help fund the development of the brand, I think, by saying, speak to that opportunity, because, we, internally before we came on, we were discussing where do we think she manufactures. If she's manufacturing here, that's really challenging. That's small orders. That's meaning that everything's, you're not...
What are the difficulties for a small brand to actually...
It's really challenging. Of course that's challenging, because, you're running to small orders and you're not turning a profit. So you've got internal challenges with running your business, because, and doing the collection like this, I even feel bad with some of, because of course it's cost a fortune to do this. And I don't underestimate that. Having a press office, having hair and makeup, models, all of those stylists, all of that lighting, music, it all costs. Yeah. So inevitably you've got to think about, this is a business. Fashion is not fine art, and even fine art sells. We're surrounded by beautiful art. Frieze Fair, if you ever go, is making a lot of money. How do you translate this into a commercially viable? I do think, it's thinking not just about, I want to be creative director, because that was a massive challenge. Look at what it did to McQueen and Galliano going into those jobs so early on. And it has a lot of churn now. It's like, your time's up, you've done 2 seasons. It's like being a football manager. Oh, yeah. So, inevitably building her own brand, making that commercially successful is the way to develop the brand, grow what she wants to do, and expand, because ultimately this is a commercial exercise. It is not, if it's just for yourself, then it will, like many other brilliant designers, not be here in a few years.
Yeah. I think also, Because if I'm not mistaken, for the show before, it was cancelled, right?
Yeah.
You know, due to
Yeah,
like
that
financial risk.
Exactly. And she was very honest about that.
It
which
was
is
very
great.
honest, and it's great, you know, for people to know this. You know, like, I mean,
agreed.
not our industry only, you know, but people overall, also people that they want to get to this industry, or they debating in their minds. Oh my gosh, if I get, and I say that to the young designers, and I'm sure you know everyone here probably does the same thing, is that all these shows, presentations, etc., is such a costly exercise, so expensive to do something like that. That and everyone is pressuring them that if you don't do it, you cannot put your work out there, and that's not the case. I mean, the previous show that Dilara did was in SS23. It was a breathtaking. I think that was a moment that everyone that switched. You know, for everyone to see Dilara in a very, very different way. It was the SS23 show that everyone, the reviews were incredible for that show. It was one of the best shows. It was very sensitive and very...
It was also moving because it was just after the earthquake, and her notes, I mean, I didn't go to many shows because I was fundraising for earthquake victims at the time, and you know, at least it was someone speaking about it and putting it out, because there was a lot of, you know, it was incredibly sensitive, and you know, I'm really glad that she put that in the notes and showed support and continued to show support.
Yeah, it was a famous.
It's a horrendous thing, and Kayseri was in the earthquake zone.
Yeah, and you know, even if she skipped one season, it doesn't feel like that.
Brings up the whole challenge of, do we need all these seasons?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. There's a few, like, you know, like Tripova Lowena, I think a couple other brands are doing every other season.
Exactly.
You know, and that's
my
working for them.
point.
Yeah,
It's
people don't forget. You know, people don't forget about the brands.
The identity is so strong that you don't need to do like so many shows and so many events.
Absolutely. And
But most of these designers are, like you said, pressured to do them because otherwise it seems like they don't exist if they skip the season.
So that's why exactly I think that a format like this will change, perhaps, you know, I mean, and I think John Galliano and Magella, you know, are going to start a really big thinking into consideration, for everyone to take into consideration. What is more important? To put out there a show that is absolutely incredible, that people will be talking for months and months and months, but they had the time to develop something like this, or is it, you know, a show just for the purpose of serving it season by season and putting out there, you know, in some cases, or in most cases, very questionable fashion, you know. So it's. I think this is maybe where we're heading out. That the show is here to serve a different type of purpose.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that you discussed about how wholesale business model is in crisis, and change is happening. And we've been through COVID. We've been through a time where things slowed down and such. When we work around the world, there's different business models there. There are so many places where designers only produce one collection a year. They're doing it in a whole different cycle. It's not this constant. I mean, I think about the creative directors that go to these big houses and they're doing their own labels and they're just doing collection.
Crazy.
And it's like, as a human, how can you be doing this and be creative and be good on yourself? And we've seen some of the results.
Yes.
But maybe it is also about slowing down the whole cycle and actually not being so that you have to do it here. And I remember when at Fashion Week, if you didn't do a show one season, that was it. You were out.
You were out.
No one would ever buy you again. No one would ever come to you, whatever. That was it. Things have changed, but maybe there's more change to come. And maybe they don't have to be every 6 months. Maybe we can start looking at a different cycle, and which works for the brands to keep them commercially going. You know, that's the next thing to work out. You know, how does that all work? Maybe look at that.
I just, you know, I'm thinking quite a lot about this, and I'm thinking quite a lot about that we have, you know, we have the miracles and the wonders of McQueen, of Galliano, of Hussein Chalayan, of Gautier, you know, of designers that they change fashion as we all know it, but maybe it was when they were doing it, it was completely different times. I wasn't around, so I don't really know how it was, you know, like how, under what type of pressure the industry were putting them on. But
I don't be naive to the fact there wasn't pressures there. There was massive pressure.
It was pressure.
Of course.
But I mean, like in a season after season and producing after
producing.
Yeah,
I think that was a pressure. I think we've got to have a whole update about what a fashion show is and what it means.
Exactly.
Because the cost is massive. The sales, you know, because in my work, what we're doing a lot around is looking at sustainability and ethics. And I have an ambition that we're looking at different fabrications, we're using more dead stock, we're dealing with the waste problem because more and more people are alert to the colonial implications of where our waste are going. And it's like a runaway train. It's a runaway train and we have the means to stop it. What I would like to see is more leadership into supporting these brands into their manufacturing domicile within the territory that they live in, working on orders which are, this direct-to-consumer conversation is really empowering for them. They're managing their money, they're not losing it to the wholesaler, they're not being put into sell or return, which is very damaging for a business and what a lot of retailers ask for. And how can that help them, develop? How can that help them know what they're paying anyone? How can you be, across your budgets if you don't know what your budget is? So how can you be stable? And this crash and burn, which is particularly prevalent in the UK, is something that I really want to see an end to. Like I said, there's been 2 million put into by DCMS, into London Fashion Week, which is obviously run by the British Fashion Council. That sounds like a lot of money, but it really isn't. It makes so much money. Brands like this with the right support, and many of the brands that we've seen across the week, could last and could be building jobs here if they were given the right support, if there were conduits into, like the aim has been with the fashion district, of saying, right, you're the designer, you're here, you're the manufacturer, you're here. Let's get this conversation going. I mean, this is where I would like to see it, because it would cut out the waste, because otherwise the growing business is the outlet model, because it's going to go on sale and you can buy it for cheaper. And the thing with a brand identity is once you've developed a brand identity, there's no point buying this season. You might as well have bought 2 seasons ago for cheaper. That's really the conflict, which is why I think, the conversation about the price, I mean, it breaks my heart when I think their mums mortgaged their house for them to show.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And you're like, no, babe, it's the lie. Like, are you really good enough for this? Because in the work I do, there are so many skills gaps, but we've got so many designers. So, the conversation about how can we plug those skills gaps. We don't have enough garment makers in the UK, and yet we have so many designers. And if we plug these gaps, it could be a phenomenal UK business. And it is great to go to a show. It is great to go to a show that makes you feel anything out of the norm, really, whether even uncomfortable. Like me watching the last model, I felt uncomfortable, but at least I own that. At least I went to a show and I saw people I love and had, tried to find my chair in the dark and was like, okay, this takes me back. You know what I mean? Like, at least it was a moment. And what are moments? Seeing you in real life, Stavros, not online. It's nice to see people.
It is. It makes you. You said it makes you feel, and also it makes us talk. Discuss about something. Have like a great, agreements and disagreements. But it really makes you feel. It makes you understand it. You want actually to talk subjects and hear, different opinions from your opinion of things or you might not know, etc., etc. And I think that is the greatest thing, that Dilara is offering, whether, every single item or every single piece can be analyzed in a lot of different ways, I think, from a customer perspective, because I think, or her audience perspective, because I think that's, in the end of the day, what is the most important thing for Dilara. I think that now everyone is so engaged with her because, they see that through her, and I think that's what is wonderful.
And there was actually a question from the audience that said, were current world events an influence on the collection this season? And if yes, how? Do you think there was any influence of world current events?
I personally saw the references and her sensibility, this kind of derangement, the kind of Jack the Ripper victims come back to life in a church. That was more where I saw it rather than current world affairs personally, but I don't know if anyone else saw things.
I think she synthesizes all that's happening culturally, socially, politically in like every collection. Personally, I find, I think her work is relational and it speaks to the way that everything exists politically, socially, and culturally. I don't see any like stark references to any significant political happenings at all, but I think that she is always incorporating that in everything that she designs, especially because it's, like we said before, like subversive. I think if you're designing something subversive, it means you have to be speaking to the hegemonic power in some way, and I think in terms of gender, she's doing that in her own way, and I don't know, I don't think it speaks to anything very overtly.
I also think that this collection was very much about a dream of what, this like idealistic, world that's detached from heteropatriarchy. So I guess it's less sort of like directly saying this look was about this particular moment where women have been oppressed, and more about thinking to the future rather than the now, perhaps.
Yeah, that's what she also said about the collection itself. Like, I wanted to put everyone in another like dimension that speaks about femininity in many different ways.
It's like that movie.
Destroys the patriarchy.
It is, yeah. It's like that movie Born in Flames, where their imagination of the future is like a feminist liberatory like context, and everything is about like dismantling everything, but also expressions of sexuality and like things like that. It's really cool.
Well, also, I think it's very interesting that Dilara can speak to many different kind of women, like you said, because, for example, she's been dressed with many different celebrities, like from Cardi B to Arinef to Rita Ora, even for her album, Emma Corrin, like a wild variety of different body types, people, personalities, and that I find quite interesting, that a designer can actually dress different type of women, also maybe because a woman has so many facets and so many different personalities.
Yeah, I think for all of our talk about, the collection lacking commerciality, she has had some really amazing red carpet moments. There was the Doja Cat one recently where I think she's tattooed like Dilara on the forehead. And she's definitely had a lot of great brand moments that would, like you were saying, definitely be the catalyst for her. If they want to.
This story with the found keys, found cutlery, I think that's really interesting, and I would personally like to see more exploration. Yeah, she's doing it in a very interesting. I mean, that to me is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a piece that we're looking at the dress from, what was that, from the show last year, right?
Yeah.
I remember seeing that and thinking, this. I would love to see more of this, and that headdress from last night, I've thought that was really interesting. The one that's, Cleopatra as a CEO.
Yeah, this like magpie
brilliant.
approach.
I mean, I think those kind of jewellery pieces, those accessory pieces that are using lost, found, that is this treasured moment. Talking about her stories, I'm just remembering that when Zoe and Brian first had Boudica, they used to write a book for each collection, I mean, for me, their technicality was phenomenal. That's why she's now head of fashion program for the MA at RCA, because she's that good. And it's that level of execution that I guess is that ambition that I want to see on the catwalk.
That could be a good category for her to go into, right? Jewellery and thinking about, how do we do this headpiece that's the keys, maybe that could be like a statement necklace, or
It's very clever.
This, the knife dress, maybe that could be, I don't know, what does that look like as an earring, or that would be a really cool category, and like super commercial, but
very
still
heavy to wear, but kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
But you're very safe in it. It's okay. You go down any street, no one's going to mess with you.
Yeah. It gets doubles up as a weapon.
Come in Andy.
But I think it's so interesting also, I mean, it's one of the few designers that I've heard that, I don't know if we can actually talk about this, but I think we can, that they started a whole petition online, like about her getting the creative director's position,
that would have been my next question.
Oh, it was? I'm sorry. I burned this,
Where we will see Dilara going, and aren't there any rumors about her possible future endeavors?
Well, McQueen is not
How many
an option
people
yet.
signed?
Not anymore.
So-
But how many people signed this petition?
Oh, I don't know.
Did it go viral?
It did go
Yeah, it did
viral.
go
Yeah, it did go
viral.
viral. This one.
I
yeah.
missed that.
Yeah.
More
Because she
campaigning
looks
about
like-
different things.
Well, she looks like a natural hair in a way, so that's why a lot of people thought about that.
I think I would like to see more women in the creative director role in
100%,
general.
yeah.
I think that,
Absolutely.
particularly women designing for women, there's something special that comes with that. And there's just such a lack of diversity right now. I think there's maybe like 6, 7, 8 women creative directors in those top houses. So yeah, I'm always keen to see more of that.
Yeah, well, if you think about the big luxury corporations and you count all the women that are in there,
Yeah.
it's really evident that we need more inclusion. And there's a very interesting exhibition at the Met that is called Women Dressing Women that will actually reminds us of how many greatest women designers we had in the past and we still have today.
Right.
Yeah. So what we're saying is we've got a woman here who has had to fight for a lot of things, and when she got rejected from the MA, she protested with her own show. There's a role she wants. She's put herself forward for it. Fair play to the woman. That's.
And we've had an
ballsy.
interesting discussion today, and she's pushing things out there. She's an outsider. She's pushing things, again, whether it's love, hate, this is emotions, and there's feeling, and there's something there. And that's what makes it so exciting, in that way. And that's why what these houses also need. They need to get passion back into it, not just another as a designer.
I personally just hope that if she is to go to a fashion house, who I completely and fully agree that we need women creative director, like in those top positions. I just hope it is in a house where they understand her very well, and is not becoming a thing where what we have seen very recently, that people are going after 2-3 seasons.
Yes.
It's like the next one and the next one and the next one.
Football manager.
Yes, exactly.
You need to have time.
Yes, because this is, I'm sure, it must be so nerve-wracking and, emotionally so hard, for these designers to go through, overall, and has definitely an effect back to their own namesake brands. So that's what I hope, she's, she has the opportunity, but also she's in an environment where she can really create what she was up for and not indisposable, like in some ways.
I'm not sure if I totally see her going to a big brand anytime soon, just because of the way that the big brands have been operating and hiring their creative directors. I think they've mainly been, after sort of doing the whole, the GmbH boys at Trusardi, and we had Bali, and we had a few others that they had these emerging designers that went in, and they were big names in their own rights, and then it, like you said, they were ousted after a couple of seasons. I think that
Ludovic.
we've seen, Ludovic, exactly. We've seen more of the trend towards hiring sort of a externally, relatively unknown name, but someone who's high up in the design teams. And I think that's probably why we're seeing a lack of diversity, because...
And male, you forgot the word male.
Exactly.
Pale male and style.
I wonder, does she even want to be a creative director of a major brand? I just realized that.
So many emerging designers don't actually want to go that.
I don't think she will ever do anything that she doesn't want to.
Yeah.
She's never worked with any of the platforms. She's always done her own thing, She's always been, I keep on thinking an outsider, which is great, because this is what the industry needs, Music needs this, art needs this, fashion needs it, with people who knock on the door from the outside, or don't even knock on the door. Maybe they don't even really care, and they don't care about actually being this. Maybe it's the last thing on her list to do this year.
Yeah, and to your point as well, do we need... Does every brand need to last forever? Does every brand need to scale up so big? A lot of designers want to stay small. And
I'm talking about being financially viable.
Yeah,
That is the essence of a sustainable
of
business.
course.
Is being able to meet your orders, pay your team, and develop your brand. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about becoming the next. I can't think of a name. But, because that's very rare in the UK, by the way. What I'm talking about is being stabilised.
But I think what is very interesting as well is that when you see those really big powerhouses and, these power groups overall, you can see perhaps, some things, how they change. And I think what happened with Phoebe Philo, for example, is a great, I think it's a great thing because, it signals that actually, right now, they're coming and investing to the namesake brands. And they don't take, those people to be positioned as creative directors to an already existing luxury powerhouse, which means, that they give them the opportunity, the chance. I mean, Phoebe Philo is Phoebe Philo. Of course, she proved who she was through decades of career and what she did for Celine, et cetera, but still is a great move because, finally, they're investing right now back to really great creative directors for their own brands. And that could be something that we might be start looking in the future, where, they're coming in to invest into their own brands instead of, taking someone and position them to an already existing luxury house and try to make them, successful in both ways.
Taking that talent and trying to push it into that square hole. And
exactly.
There you go. Why not have more of these designers come through and be supported?
That's my point around funding and support. If you've got more funding, you've got more support for that brand to go through that transition from graduate into moment into next step. Because that's the hard bit, isn't it?
I guess the question is, to finish what I was saying earlier, it's this thing about, does every brand need to become this brand that exists after the founder? Does McQueen need to keep going after he passed, or does Dilara, will that scale to the point where it exists as a brand outside of the founder? I think that's quite interesting.
We ask a lot with designers around the world, we talk a lot about sustainable, successful brands, and so we understand sustainable, as you've talked about. What is success? And again, success doesn't mean you're going to take over the world. What does successful mean for you, and what will make you happy?
Yeah.
And so different designers, different people have different levels of what they want to do. They don't have to keep on growing.
And especially when you think about all these huge houses right now where they do have that, that need to grow exponentially because they have investors looking at them and all these pressures that are making both the market so much tighter but also much less sustainable. Is that something that every young designer wants to aspire to? I don't know.
Well, I think we can all agree that we wish Dilara to access more funding and possibilities, but we wish her to be her truest self and not to change for, anyone else.
Not even us, yes.
No, probably not. But I want to thank you today for being here with me, and thank you for those watching, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.